Hello, welcome to the Motivational Stories podcast. I am your host, Ricky Lahiri, and today's story is called Marcus Aurelius and a Plague in Pannonia, a Stoic Emperor's Test. The biting wind whipped across the Pannonian plains, carrying with it the stench of war and something far more insidious, disease. The year was 172 AD, and Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and a follower of Stoicism, found himself facing a crisis unlike any other. For years, he had led his legions against the Germanic tribes, pushing back barbarian incursions on the empire's northern borders. Yet, now, a different enemy stalked the camps, the plague. It arrived silently, a creeping horror that began with chills and fever, then morphed into agonizing dysentery and delirium. Fear, a serpent more venomous than any barbarian blade, slithered through the ranks. Soldiers, once proud and disciplined, lay huddled in their tents, whimpering for water or the comfort of a mother they hadn't seen in years. Marcus, a man of iron will and unwavering duty, felt a cold dread grip his heart. He wasn't just the emperor, he was the commander, the father figure to these men. He had a responsibility, not just to the empire, but to each life entrusted to him. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the treeless horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows, Marcus found himself drawn to the makeshift hospital tent. The air hung heavy with the smell of decay and burnt herbs, a desperate attempt to ward off the miasma. Inside, men lay on straw pallets, their once strong bodies racked with tremors. A young legionnaire, barely out of his teens, whimpered incoherently, his eyes glazed with fever. A grizzled veteran, his weathered face etched with pain, coughed uncontrollably, each spasm rattling his chest like a loose tile. Marcus, his own stomach churning with nausea, moved from bed to bed, speaking words of encouragement in a voice that he forced to remain steady. He offered what little comfort he could, a hand held, a damp cloth pressed to a burning forehead. He saw in their eyes not fear of death, but of dying alone, far from home and loved ones. Leaving the tent, the weight of his responsibility settled even more heavily on his shoulders. The plague wasn't just ravaging the troops, it was tearing at the very fabric of his Stoic beliefs. Stoicism preached acceptance of fate, the understanding that external events were beyond our control. But these men, these weren't abstract forces, they were individuals, each with a story, a family waiting for their return. How could he accept their suffering without succumbing to despair? That night, huddled in his tent by the flickering lamp, Marcus reached for his writing tablets. He found solace in recording his thoughts, a practice he had adopted years ago, which later became known as his meditations. In the flickering light, he poured out his anguish, how to face this, O gods, how to reconcile duty with compassion. These men deserve better. They deserve a leader who is not just strong but empathetic, not just stoic but human. Sleep came late, filled with fevered dreams of battlefields littered with the sick and the dying. The following morning, a newfound resolve burned in Marcus's eyes. He addressed the legions, his voice carrying across the camp. He spoke not just as emperor but as a fellow human who understood their fear. He acknowledged the cruelty of fate, the randomness of the plague. But he also reminded them of their duty, of the oath they had sworn to protect the empire, and most importantly, to protect each other. He implemented new measures. Sanitation protocols were strictly enforced. The sick were segregated, and those fortunate enough to be healthy were tasked with caring for their comrades. Marcus himself led by example, tending to the sick, checking on supplies, and ensuring order amidst the chaos. The days that followed were a blur of feverish activity. Marcus, ever the Stoic, found solace in the routine, in the act of taking control of what he could control. He saw a transformation in the eyes of his men. Fear, while not entirely vanquished, was replaced by a grim determination, a sense of shared purpose. They fought the plague with the same discipline and courage they had used to fight barbarians. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The number of new infections dwindled, and the sick started showing signs of recovery. The camp, once a breeding ground for despair, began to hum with a cautious optimism. One crisp autumn morning, the trumpets blared, their triumphant music marking a turning point. It was time to break camp and continue the campaign against the Germanic tribes. As the legions marched out, leaving behind the mass graves and the stench of death, Marcus rode at the forefront, a sense of weary satisfaction filling him. The Stoic ideals he held dear hadn't been abandoned, they had been tested and refined. He had learned that duty and compassion weren't mutually exclusive. He had witnessed firsthand the power of human resilience, the ability to find strength in the face of unimaginable hardship. The war itself proved no easier. The Germanic tribes, emboldened by the news of the Roman plague, launched a series of fierce attacks. Battles were bloody, victories hard won. Yet, Marcus's legions fought with a renewed vigor, their bond forged in the crucible of the plague unbreakable. They carried with them the memory of their fallen comrades, a silent vow to honor their sacrifice. One particularly brutal battle saw Marcus leading a crucial charge. His horse stumbled, throwing him to the ground. A searing pain lanced through his leg, and for a terrifying moment, he thought his own time had come. But even as his vision blurred, he heard the roar of his men rise above the din of battle. He looked up to see his trusted general, Gaius, fighting his way towards him. Gaius, a man who had lost his own son to the plague, hauled Marcus back onto his feet, a silent understanding passing between them. Together, they rallied the troops and secured a decisive victory. However, the injury sustained by Marcus proved far worse than initially thought. Months passed as he lay recuperating in a makeshift fort, his leg refusing to heal properly. Frustration gnawed at him. He longed to be out there with his men, facing the enemy head-on. One day, a gruff but familiar voice cut through his brooding. It was Galeria, his wife, a woman known for her sharp wit and unwavering loyalty. She stood beside his cot, her gaze steady. "You cannot," she said, her voice laced with a quiet strength, "win every battle, Marcus. Sometimes, the battlefield is within." His retort died in his throat. Galeria was right. He had spent years training his body for war, but the battle against his own mortality, against the limitations of the flesh, was a new kind of conflict. He understood then that true stoicism wasn't about being emotionless, but about channeling those emotions constructively. He began to focus on what he could control. He spent hours dictating his meditations, recording his philosophy for posterity. He met with advisors, strategizing for the future of the empire. He even used his injured leg as a teaching moment, discussing the fragility of life with his closest officers, reminding them of the importance of living each day to the fullest. News of his resilience reached the legions. Here was their emperor, wounded but unbroken, leading by example even from his sickbed. It bolstered their morale, solidifying their loyalty and commitment to the cause. Finally, after a long and arduous recovery, Marcus was able to rejoin his legions. He limped, a constant reminder of his battle with mortality, but his spirit remained undimmed. He led them to one final, decisive victory against the Germanic tribes, securing the northern borders for years to come. The war ended, but the lessons learned in Pannonia stayed with Marcus. He returned to Rome a changed emperor, hardened by war, yet tempered by compassion. He understood the fragility of life, the importance of human connection, and the power of finding meaning even amidst suffering. His reign, marked by both military triumphs and philosophical reflection, became a testament to the enduring principles of Stoicism, the ability to face adversity with courage, to find strength in duty, and to discover peace within oneself, regardless of external circumstances. As the years passed, and Marcus Aurelius prepared to hand the reins over to his son, Commodus, he knew his legacy extended beyond victories on the battlefield. He had led by example, showing his people how to live a good life, a life of purpose, resilience, and unwavering humanity, even in the face of a plague in Pannonia. Thank you for listening. If you like the stories I tell, please follow the podcast and subscribe to it to get the latest notifications about the release of episodes. You can also follow me on X, previously known as Twitter, to get the latest notifications regarding episodes. I have provided a link to my X profile in the description section of the episode and the podcast.